back to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And last week, we lost a lot of data and time and effort. So we didn't get to release a Spider-Man 3, Amazing Spider-Man 2 episode. And we feel terrible about that. So here you go. We're going to do 2 somewhat shorter episodes. I think we're looking at probably shooting for about 45 minutes. Don't hold us to that. And so we're recording them both in one night, so it's going to be a part 1 and a part 2. Part 2 is going to be our Incredible Spider-Man, or Into the Spider-Verse. I don't know what the fuck Incredible Spider-Man is.
The next reboot.
I mean, yeah, of course. So yeah, we're going to be doing 2 parts. So if you want to listen to both of them, I recommend starting with this one because I'm sure some of our discussion from this will segue into the second part. But you're welcome to skip around as you see fit.
I also recommend going back and watching the previous episodes on the other 2 Raimi films if you have not watched it yet, because we are talking about Spider-Man 3. We're going to drop some hot takes, and I think we're going to be building on a lot of that work.
Yeah. Also, I'm going to speak for Jackson for a second because I can already hear a little bit of audio weirdness. He is not in his usual recording studio, so we're going to do our best to get that leveled out, but no promises.
I am 100%, I am not at all huddled in a dark corner of my mom's small house trying not to wake up the entire family with my booming, horrible voice, so please forgive me.
Yeah, which is why he sounds like knockoff David Hayter currently, so...
Okay, now I'm not trying to do it.
I think your whisper voice, you just lower your octaves a little bit, and it kind of slips into the same way that you do when you try and imitate Solid Snake.
Great. Well, I guess I truly am a diseased individual.
All right, so let's fucking talk about the Spider-Man movies, and let's start with the high point, the amazing. Oh my god,
we're gonna caught yourself.
Talk about too many. I was gonna say Amazing Spider-Man 3, which just doesn't exist either. So we're gonna talk with Raimi's Spider-Man 3 first, which. Spoiler alert for both of us. Not actually spoilers. You're good to keep listening. It's fucking wonderful, and I am a staunch defender of this movie now.
Spider-Man 3, after watching it again, because like the other 2 Raimi movies, I hadn't seen it since it came out in theaters, so I'd only known its reputation as the bad one, and really, really infamously, people dog this movie so hard compared to Batman vs. Superman and that tier, but I think people are nuts. The movie isn't perfect. It's not. I don't think it's as good as the first 2, but it's a very worthy sequel to Spider-Man 1 and 2, and completely in line with everything those movies were doing with tone and theme and plot and style. So I don't get it. I just don't get why people hate this movie as much as they do.
I kind of do, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit moving into spoilers, because I think it has a lot to do with the final 30 minutes, which I actually have a pretty staunch defense for the final 30 minutes, despite the fact that they do fall apart. But yeah, I really like this one a lot too. It's very good in a lot of ways. Much like the others, it has some big pitfalls, but that's just kind of the Raimi Spider-Man. You take the good, you take the bad, and there you have a really fucking good trilogy.
It's still you had proposed last week that maybe that you'd either read somewhere or just heard somewhere that Raimi intentionally sort of phoned it in on this one, but if he did, I can't tell.
Yeah,
I can't tell at all.
There's little bits with the Venom arc where I feel like he kind of did, because the meteor that has Venom in it just kind of fucking shows up in the background, and it looks added totally late into post. Fuck it, just have it land.
That's fair, but that would be the stuff the studio was forcing on him. So he just basically, it seems like he just made the rest of his movie around that.
Yeah.
And then phoned that in.
Yeah, a lot of the Venom stuff feels kind of phoned in, but he clearly... It was interesting watching it, because I'm you could, up to this point, basically cut out the entirety of Venom and the story wouldn't change almost at all. Almost the entirety of it, honestly, could be done sans Venom, and it would still be really, like, it would still be comprehensible.
Yeah, like the only thing that Venom really like adds to the main story for the first good chunk of it is like having the specific visual like iconography of the black suit, which to be fair, I think they use that pretty well. I like that there is a specific sort of object that tempts Peter. I think that's nice in kind of that melodramatic, like Spider-Man-y sort of way, in a way that maybe you could still do by just having him, like, you know, thinking about giving into his hate and giving into his anger and chasing after Sandman. But also, I mean, I think when the symbiote is the black suit Spider-Man, I think that it's integrated pretty well. It's just that when we get to Venom.
I mean, even the integrated suit, I would argue, feels like something that could be happening without the symbiote. Like, when he gets into that dance number, feels exactly like something a nerd would do if he's cocky, on edge, and his life is kind of falling apart. Like, it...
Oh, it definitely does. I do like having... you know, again, maybe as ham-fisted as it is, I do like the visual metaphor of it, though, that, like, he puts it on when, like, you know, he's giving into those, like, the hatred and emotions. I think it's edgy in a good way.
It for sure is, but it does kind of make me wonder, like, it's totally possible there could have been a totally different visual metaphor at the same time. Like, he could have made his own black suit just because he felt angry. Like, I could totally see that. Like, every day he goes out wondering, like, what Spider-Man am I going to be today? Like, that's how that whole section felt to me.
Yeah, no, I guess that's true. I guess you're completely right.
And, like, the only part where, like, the symbiote's actually a thing is the beginning when it looks weird and ham-fisted in, and the end, which, by the time the end rolls around, it actually ends up playing relatively well. So, I feel like... removing Venom from the end and having it just be Sandman, I'm not really spoiling anything, let's be honest. And like how it all comes together would have been more cohesive for the ending, but I don't think Venom really detracted that much.
No, I honestly, like, I'm not such a big fan of the, like, last 30 minutes. Like, pretty much once, Eddie Brock, like, gets the symbiote, like, I think it starts to lose steam, not in, like, a catastrophic way, but just, like, I wasn't as into it as I was before. But it's hard for me to put my finger on why, because it's like, you can say there's too many villains and, like, too much stuff going on, but, like, the first two Raimi movies juggled a lot of stuff and, like, did it with, you know, a lot of grace, and, like, a lot of the plot threads made sense, like Sandman and Venom teaming up.
It's entirely because Venom was added on. Like, in your mind, subtract Venom and just set up the final fight scene where it's just with Sandman, and it all makes a lot more sense. Like, the resolution of that scene makes a lot of sense. Because, hey, one of them's just all of a sudden absent again. Hey-oh. And, like, it all kind of plays together a lot smoother.
Yeah, and then without Venom, you just have the interplay with Harry. Yeah, okay.
That's why it feels bad, because Venom shouldn't have been there. Like, and I think, like, he definitely phoned in the Venom stuff, but I feel like it didn't really impact the rest of the movie as much as people say it did.
No, because, like, that's pretty much the only criticisms that people ever have of this movie is too many villains and emo Peter Parker dancing, whatever scene you want to talk about. I mean, talk about, like, you know, spoiler alert, we're talking about Amazing Spider-Man 2 as well. That movie was way worse than this one, and yet Spider-Man 3 is still the one they make fun of in Into the Spider-Verse. So it's so strange that, like, this is the movie that people get hung up on. Like, if we're talking bad superhero sequels, like, this is 1,000 times better than something like The Dark Knight Rises. I don't get it. I just don't get it.
I think part of the reason that it gets made fun of oh my god, that's going to be a lot of ins. I think part of the reason that it gets made fun of so much in so many things, like Into the Spider-Verse, that's a better way of phrasing it, is just that, like, the dance scene is so iconic. Like, it has become such a... I think even had it not been made fun of, it's such a weird out of the blue thing. And like Tobey Maguire is just chewing scenery and hamming it the fuck up. That like I think that scene was destined, no matter what, no matter the critical reception, to kind of become a meme unto itself. Like I don't think that they could have avoided that one.
They also make like a Green Goblin sleep joke in Into the Spider-Verse, so I could see that's just a lot of the Raimi movies after watching them again.
I laughed at that and I didn't know why. That's why, because it's the Raimi thing.
I was the only one in the theater who laughed at that.
Yeah, me too. I was with Sam and I laughed and she's like, what's funny? I'm like, I don't know, but the way that was delivered, that's why, because it was Willem Dafoe going, sleep. Oh my god, the Raimi movies are so fucking good. Alright, before we get into spoilers, let's talk about Amazing Spider-Man 2. Where, you can start on this one, because I started with Spider-Man 3.
I was gonna say, I got more backstory on this one, too. So, the Amazing Spider-Man movies, as I had maybe mentioned in our previous episode, and that I always liked Spider-Man, but I didn't love Spider-Man, and that I watched the Raimi movies when I was a kid. I had a fun time, and remembered some cool scenes, and I liked how he swung around and did wacky stuff, but like they didn't leave a huge impact on my memory. But the whole like Spider-Man aesthetic of like juggling, mundane stuff and like wacky supernatural criminal stuff, relationship drama, and also like fight scenes, like the idea of Spider-Man has always been like my shit. So when they released The Amazing Spider-Man 1, or when they were talking about making that and kind of like updating it to be more in line, like less of the like crazy Raimi style and more in line with like what was expected for a blockbuster at the time, I understood why people didn't like that they were rebooting Spider-Man so soon, but like I was a senior in high school when Amazing Spider-Man 1 came out, so like I was at exactly the right age to enjoy it, especially since Spider-Man just ticks a lot of my boxes, and I did enjoy it. And then, a lot of people didn't. That one was a little more divisive, but it had plenty of fans too. Like there was a genuine argument between people who liked, Peter Parker as Tobey Maguire and people who liked Peter Parker as Andrew Garfield. So when Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, I went in like genuinely looking forward to it, and my initial reaction was that although the script was a mess, it wasn't particularly well written, there was a lot of stuff about it that left me with an overall like pretty positive impression, particularly like the romantic chemistry between the two leads, between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. And so Sean and so many others, the first time they saw Amazing Spider-Man 2, and you can talk about your own particular reactions, but needless to say, it is the movie that sank the whole Amazing Spider-Man side universe with like the Sinister Six or whatever they were doing.
God, I can't believe they're gonna put 6 of them.
and like I understood like intellectually I understood the criticisms, but like emotionally I was still like, I don't know, it's the most brain dead I've ever felt about a movie, I think. Like high praise. It's like for like only the briefest moment, like the dark reflection in the mirror, like me looking in and seeing the people who like watch every Transformers movies because things blow up, and that was the moment where like Spider-Man, I had to ask if I was truly so different to the villains that I was battling.
Hey, the Bumblebee movie's supposed to be pretty good.
I've heard that actually. Who directed that?
I don't know. Let's do some side Googling really quick.
Because all I know is that it was not Michael Bay, which is like evidence enough for me to believe that it's actually pretty good.
Well, Haley Steinfeld's in it again, and like she's been in a lot we've watched recently.
Yeah, no kidding.
It's directed by Travis Knight, oh my god. Oh no, he's on the animation department. He's a big part of Laika, actually.
Oh, huh.
Oh yeah, and he directed Cuba and the Two Strings. All right, I'm sold. Fuck, man, I'm sold. Laika is like my shit.
It's Leica your shit?
It's Leica my shit. And fucking Kubo is so good. I'm so psyched. All right, cool. I'm on board.
I still gotta watch Kubo. I got that Blu-ray sitting in my house still.
Anyway. Wonderful. Yeah, I'll talk about my experience with Amazing Spider-Man 2 now that I'm thinking about Kubo. I fucking hated Amazing Spider-Man 2 when I left it the first time. I thought it was a complete mess. There was just weird things happening all over the place. I actually was a defender of Amazing Spider-Man 1. I'm like, all right, you know what? This is stupid. The script is a mess, but like, it's got potential. Let's see where it goes. There's a whole Andrew Garfield's a better Spider-Man, but Tobey Maguire is a better Peter Parker, and that's 100% true. Like, it's not wrong. But I'm like, all right, let's just let him grow into it. It's the first movie, mistakes, grow, all that good stuff. And then the second one just pissed me off to no end. I've said many times that I almost left the theater on this one because I fucking abhorred it. It was awful. This time, I softened a lot on it. I remember hearing a lot about how there's a lot of chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, and I looked for that more this time. And I tweeted something to the effect of, this is first and foremost a love story. And if you take it as such, it's a pretty okay movie. If you take the Raimi Spider-Man arc and look at it as a personal story about Peter Parker, you take the Amazing Spider-Man 2 and look at it as a love story, you get kind of something different out of it. And I going into it like that, I kind of put some of the other stuff aside. I'm like, all right, the love story, let's focus on the chemistry, see how this looks. And the chemistry is definitely there. It still falls into a lot of like boring ass love story tropes. It becomes a lot of like really creepy tropes. Like at one point he's like, I've been stalking you. And she's like, haha, that's cool. And we move on. And it's fucking miserable.
That was always the meme, was that this was the Spider-Man Spider-Light, people called it, because of like Andrew Garfield's Edward Cullen haircut and just the general like focus on the romance, which, I think just for focusing on the romance, that's I think that it's a bit unfair. It's unfair to Twilight too, that like romance stories are sort of like looked down upon in that way. But on the other hand, there definitely are some Twilight connections to be made with, like, the stalking.
I gotta talk about this for a hot second. Did you see, you're not on Twitter as much anymore. Fucking, just today, Boys Life announced that Twilight's, like, the worst movie ever, and film Twitter fucking blew up.
Oh, no.
They're like, excuse you? Most of film Twitter's like, it's not even the worst Twilight movie. And it's not.
It's not. Oh, my God. Oh, see, I had seen something about that. At first, I thought it was like Time or the New York Times or something, like a legitimate publication. But the fact that like it was in a publication aimed at little boys somehow makes it all the worse.
Yeah, it's literally just like, ew, icky, love girls. No. And also, clearly, no one has actually watched any of these.
No.
As someone who watches the last Breaking Dawn Part 2 literally every time it's on television.
We got to talk about that movie sometime.
Because that's a drop right there. The fact that I just straight up, like, I watched that movie a lot. Because it's terrible in the best possible way.
Come on, people in the comments, you know what to do. Poke us, prod us for it.
Oh, it's so good. But yeah, no, that I just needed to sidetrack that because I'm like, excuse you, fucking excuse you,
excuse you, me.
But yeah, no. So it's better if you just focus on the romance. The action is garbage. The script has some just incredibly abysmal low points. There's some pretty decent high points. Like, once again, there's about 10 minutes before the final 5 minutes of the movie that is really good and like actually emotional. And like, I felt myself kind of welling up a little bit, which is surprising because I was expecting to hate this movie with every fiber of my being. So props to that. But it still ends up just like overwhelmingly being really shitty in general. Like, it's not good. It's not as bad as I remember, but it still fucking sucks.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely reached like between the two of us equilibrium on this movie, because I came back to it with like kind of like a dumb puppy. Like I was like, oh, like, you know, the pretty people like make googly eyes at each other, and then Spider-Man swings around, and then I came back and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of creepy stalking stuff, and this might genuinely be like one of the worst scripts structurally that I've seen in a major film. Oh no.
Especially because it's really weird. We were talking about this in the pre-discussion, that they managed to take all of these people who are fundamentally attractive people. Jamie Foxx, Andrew Garfield. I'm not a huge fan of his face, but, you know, Emma Stone. All these people are like fundamentally pretty attractive, and they somehow make all of them look really bad in this movie. Like, unattractive. It's incredible. Like, they somehow make everyone look bad.
At least with Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx is so weird because he feels like he walked in. Like, this is one criticism that I completely agree with, is that Jamie Foxx feels like he walked in from, like, Batman Forever, or one of the other Schumacher Batmans. I guess there's only Batman and Robin, but, like, one of those two. And it's completely true. Like, he feels like a cartoon. And he looks like a cartoon, too. Like, even more, like, over the top, like, disheveled nerd than anything that showed up in even the Raimi movies, which were intentionally kind of broad and over the top and melodramatic. It was wild.
And also, like, and this is just totally a nitpick on my part, and not even really worth the tape it's recorded on. Is that whatever. Like, what the fuck that's not anything Electro. Like, I'm all for, like, you know, change how everything works. Like, I don't care, you know, whether they got Jamie Foxx or just another generic white dude to play Electro. Whatever. I can't think of a single time that Electro's been fucking Dr. Manhattan.
You know, it'd be easier to explain if this had come out, like, close to when the Watchmen movie did, and like wanted to capitalize on that, because that just happens, but like it didn't.
No.
It didn't at all.
This movie just fucking dropped Dr. Manhattan back on us, and like he even has the same like disappearing powers. And dude, Electro in this fucking movie, he plays itsy bitsy spider on fucking Tesla coils. And
I'll say this about Electro. I think that he is the subject of my favorite like romance scene. Like, pretty much all the good scenes in this movie are just of like Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone being cute. But the one scene that I do genuinely really like, and I think this scene actually, come to think of it, got a lot of I think it earned a lot of goodwill from me from the movie the first time I watched it, just because it comes pretty early on in the movie, and at the time, like, this aired the same week that Winter Soldier did, I remember, which was a movie that I was not really all that fond of, in part because I felt like this is the kind of the point where, like, the Marvel movies started being less superhero movies about, like, saving people and like moral dilemmas, and more just like straightforward spy thrillers, which is one of the things I didn't like about that. Whereas the scene that I really, really like from this is when like Jamie Foxx first becomes Electro, and he's like just stumbling into the street, and he's like desperately trying to get people to understand, and he keeps making stuff happen, and it's like kind of like, it's pathetic in like a good way. And then, you know, Spider-Man shows up, and I like that he doesn't immediately, you know, just start like beating on him, or like convene an excuse to like sort of fight him, but then like he actually goes and takes the effort and talks him down, and like tries to remember his like interactions that he had with him earlier when he brings it up. And the way that scene sort of escalates, like kind of, you know, goes sort of tragically wrong, felt pretty natural to me. Like there were, I mean, towards the end, like after the fact that, like I thought it was interesting that Spider-Man's like good publicity is sort of what like turned him against him. Like that maybe could have been an interesting idea in a movie with a real villain. But like that, I think the fact that like we see a superhero like try to solve the problem with like a superpower bad guy, not by punching, felt very like Christopher Reeve Superman, very, Sam Raimi, Spider-Man. It felt, that's the scene that feels most like the core of Spider-Man in the movie is, when he's being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and that's really the only time we get it. But I think that one scene, just from the state of like how I felt about superhero movies at the time, like really got to me and earned like a lot of good favor from me early on. That just Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield being cute was enough to sustain me.
It is a good scene. Like there's no denying that. I just wish he didn't look like Dr. Manhattan. I think that's really distracting for me. As someone who's pretty intimately familiar with the Watchmen canon, I guess. So like that was pretty distracting for me. I think part of it too, at least on this watch, like I don't really remember how I felt about it the first time, but on this watch I was still kind of in that mood of like expecting to not like it, so I wasn't as taken with that scene, I think. It is a cool idea. It comes in a movie that's not very good, unfortunately.
Yes, that's what I was thinking about. I'm like, there are a lot of little nuggets in this movie that are genuinely very effective. I mean, we've been like getting more into the nitty gritty now for a bit now, so I guess we just call it spoilers.
Yeah, let's talk spoilers.
Yeah, because we need to talk about Gwen. In that, so this is the movie where Gwen Stacy dies, and until like Spider-Gwen was a thing. Like that was pretty much all Gwen Stacy was really known for.
Go check out MovieBob's video about that. It's really fucking good.
I was wondering because I'm definitely parroting MovieBob here.
Yep, link will be in the description.
So that's what Gwen Stacy was known for, and it's not something that even as someone who like didn't read the comics and was just like on the periphery of like the culture, I knew that's what the character was known for, and that's like what you go with for her. And it's so the beginning of the movie, I remember. The other thing too is that I remember going into the movie like my brain just completely bleeped past like Peter's like spy dad stuff. Like I totally forgot that was the note the movie opened on, which was weird. But then like you have Gwen giving her speech and it being weirdly about like death, which I feel like most valedictorian speeches are not about, but like
we're graduating high school, time to die.
Yeah, and so like it's very transparently put in there to foreshadow what comic fans know is going to happen. And so giving the filmmakers and the writers way too much credit. When I first watched the movie, it was like, aha, they're making this so obvious because they know that we know that Gwen is going to die. So they're not actually going to do it. They're actually going to develop their character more and like to take it in a different direction. You clever dogs, you. And then they do and then they do it.
She's dead. She dies. And like there's a lot of criticism on her death too, like the hand and everything like that. I remember hating the web hand. I didn't hate it this time. Like I feel like part of that is just I've grown as someone who understands movies. I feel like this is a very easy movie to hate if you are in deep on like CinemaSins and stuff, which I feel like I was at the time. Because like everything about it is very tropey and cliched, and that's what they really harp on with CinemaSins and like weird little impossibilities and stuff. And so like the hand to me stuck out as like, oh my god, what the fuck? It's the stupidest fucking thing I've ever seen. But I think in retrospect, I'm like, okay, I don't think it's really that bad. I think, the filmmaker was trying to make a choice here, trying to be a little creative with it. It's goofy, it's hokey, it's fucking Spider-Man, who cares?
It was kind of like the hokiness is kind of a breath of fresh air for me after like a lot of the self-serious, like dated, like early 2010s blockbuster style that the rest of the movie has going on.
Yeah, like it's really not that bad. It's just at the time I remember absolutely hating it. I thought it fucking sucked. So like I guess if you haven't watched it recently, go back and watch it again and think more about what the filmmaker intended for it to do rather than like what it looks like, because I feel like intent's really important in this movie.
Yeah, and So regarding the death, I actually the hand I could see it, even I was like, oh, okay, well, but like the moment when it happens, like you see how like it isn't like the neck snap. You see that like she kind of hits her head. Both times I was like, ooh, like it does feel pretty understated, but in a way that I think it's actually kind of effective when it happens. Like at least the way that it's shot and sort of framed until I think you posted this on your Twitter, until we get like a close up of Andrew Garfield's face for the next 5 minutes. But yeah, like that scene. Honestly, what was more in hindsight, now that I knew that the filmmakers weren't clever, in hindsight, what bothered me so much more was like the fact that they were in the clock tower and like the cogs of time were stopping, and I'm like, oh no.
Oh, the time motif was just throughout the entire fucking movie. There was an early clock, like it opens on a clock pan out, and I looked at it, I'm like, is this a logo? Like, this is a logo, right? Like, this is gonna turn out to be like A24 or something. A24 would not fucking make this movie. But like, you know, something like that. And instead it's like the beginning of the movie, I'm like, oh, that was poor. I get it's themes, I get it, time, but like hit the nail a little bit harder, why don't you?
It's like literally all they have to say about it is that people die eventually. Then their time runs out. And it's like, yep, it sure does, Amazing Spider-Man 2.
The clock broke, and so did she.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about her death a little bit, though, too, because you mentioned that, like, you know, the shot of her after she hits is really good. It's like this still shot of Peter standing over her. And, like, it is a really good shot for about 30 seconds, and I remember watching it thinking, pan away, pan away, pan away, pan away, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, and sure enough, they zoom in, and you got Andrew Garfield looking puffy and red, just like, no, and I'm like, god damn it, that was a really good scene, why did you do that? The other thing I will say is that you mentioned, like, how it works well that she, you know, dies when she hits. Like, I think the reason that has a little bit of a lesser impact on me is because I am pretty intimately familiar with the comic and, like, how she dies in the comics. Which, if you don't know, she doesn't die from impact. She dies from the G's when Peter's web catches her. Like, it hits it catches her, and it snaps her neck as she yanks back. Which I think is... like it puts more of the blame on Peter, which like that's, you know, what they go for with that whole scene. You know, and unfortunately that is Gwen Stacy for a long time, but like it worked as a very effective oh shit moment for Peter when they were trying to give him an oh shit moment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and
I feel like it's a little bit lesser having her hit the ground and die.
No, I think you're definitely right, because like that's sort of what distinguishes Gwen from Uncle Ben, is that with Uncle Ben, like, Peter was responsible, but he was responsible through inaction. And like in the Spider-Man like mythos, like you said, it's very direct. Like, it's very much like if he had done something differently, like maybe he still could have saved her, and, you know, failed. And so like I think that is a pretty key important difference, and I think that is worth preserving. But I also think that the way they did it, like independently of that, again, not as like into the deep lore and finding all this out, sort of like, you know, the nitty-gritty details like afterwards, like my initial reaction, it got to me a little bit as a bit of an outsider.
It totally could. If you are unfamiliar with the source material, it's effective. Do we want to swap over to Spider-Man 3 for a little bit?
Yes. Do we want to talk about the very ending? Because I think, like, as far as like death in Amazing Spider-Man 2, I mean, we could talk about Harry, but who fucking cares about Harry? But like, I feel like we should talk about like the graveyard scene and the ending, and maybe why that does or does not work. I think it's worth mentioning. Yeah,
we can dive into the graveyard scene. Because there's like, I'm just gonna fucking go from it. Who cares? That was a fine segue anyway. So the graveyard scene, it's basically just Peter standing in front of Gwen's grave for a little while. He talks to Aunt May in a very subdued way, and like it's him changing seasons, as you know, or it's the seasons changing around him, you know. and it's really just slow and poignant and effective, and really it's emotional. As I said, like I actually welled up a little bit at it. Like it was really well made. Aunt May gives a very like, I'm not letting them go, I'm just moving them to a better place where I can better compartmentalize it and move on with my life. And I thought it's a really effective scene, and it works really well. And then they bring in the Rhino.
Yeah, because I was thinking the same thing, and that like I know you want your movie to end on like a hopeful note of like Spider-Man like coming back and getting back on the horse, but like I wish they had just like, I wish they didn't end with him putting on the suit again and like the Rhino, and like maybe have him like the last shot could be like him looking at like maybe instead of like instead, I mean this would require more artistry than the people involved obviously have, but like maybe instead of like actually going out and fighting, like kind of following Aunt May's sort of example, and like, you know, maybe he's put the suit in like a box at the bottom of his closet and like purposefully like obscured it with a bunch of other things, and he's going through like all the stuff that he had like with Gwen, and then he sees it, and maybe instead of putting it on, he just like hangs it back up or something, and then,
or even just like throws it on the bed and looks at it or something.
Yeah, like I feel like that'd be a nice way to like still have that like hopefulness that like, you know, yeah, there will be an Amazing Spider-Man 3, lol, but you know, Peter will be back and he'll get back on the horse, and you know, he'll work through this, you know, the way that he always does, but without sacrificing the like poignancy by just, you know, throwing in Paul Giamatti in a
Paul Giamatti. Oh man, the worst part about that is I remember seeing the GIF of that got kind of like posted as a teaser for the movie, like the whole final fight scene, because the whole final fight scene with the Rhino takes all of 30 seconds and ends with Peter swinging a manhole cover at his head, and it's a really cool fight scene. It's good. If Paul Giamatti didn't look really stupid in that suit. But I remember seeing it on Reddit, of all places, way back when, and think, oh, alright, cool. This is going to be good. Like, the action in this looks really good. I'm fucking pumped for it. And then they end on it. I'm like, well, that fucking sucked. That was your promo material, and it ends there? Like, you posted this like it's going to be the fight, and it's just nothing. What was the point of that?
Definitely was a real like blue balls moment for sure. Like,
yeah, it fucking sucks.
Because I remember it was in the trailer. Like, I hadn't even seen the promo material, but like I remember that shot of him swinging the manhole cover. That was definitely in the trailer.
It's a cool shot, and so they used it everywhere, and then it's nothing. It's nothing. Of course, it's nothing.
Just like most of the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, it's all dumb. Amazing Spider-Man or Spider-Man 3 isn't, though. I like Spider-Man 3 a lot. And let's talk about the ending of Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, so why don't you walk me through this one? Because, like, I'm having trouble, like, pinning down exactly how I feel about the ending of Spider-Man 3. So let me hear your case for it.
So, the big things with Spider-Man 3, we talked about this a little bit, and I kind of gave you an idea on, like, what to think about as to how I'm kind of looking at it if it was without Venom. But for right now, let's keep Venom in, just to play it as it is. I really like the ending of Spider-Man 3 now. When they first saw it, I thought it was fucking terrible, because they're like, oh, he just let Sandman go? Like, he wrecks a bunch of havoc, and then he just flies away like, oh no, bye. And like, I'm like, this is fucking stupid. What the fuck is the point of that? But I think as far as like a narrative finale, it works really well, because finding out that there was a second killer in his uncle's death is really cool, because it gives you that rare second chance to fix what you didn't do last time. And while he killed the first guy, this one he's like, that's not how I roll anymore. That's not how I operate. There's forgiveness. There's more sides to this story. And it is a full arc for him to come to that point. So I think from a narrative standpoint, letting the Sandman go like that is surprisingly satisfying. If you've watched all three of the movies in like quick succession like we have. I feel like outside of that, you might not appreciate it in that same way, and I totally understand why.
I think that's a really great point, because I had the same, like, again, looking at the complete narrative arc of, like, Sandman's role in the story. I was iffy at first. I'm like, ooh, like, we retconning Uncle Ben's death, like, oh no, that was the most effective stuff in the first movie, but, like, they handled it really well.
Yeah, and like it was clearly intentional. Like it didn't feel like I remember feeling like they are retconning it, but like I feel like watching it again, I'm like, no, this feels very much like it was an intended part of the series.
Yeah, and especially because like Sandman is like Doc Ock was sympathetic to a degree, but even he still had the like my technology is poisoning my mind sort of problem that Green Goblin had, and there was much more of a clear split. Whereas like Sandman as a villain is a lot more sympathetic. Like you can tell that he has like been through some shit and like does what he can to like try and help his daughter. Like is
Clearly feels really bad.
Yeah, like he's still like he's a killer, but he's still a person. And the thing is that having Peter wrestle with that as like sort of the catalyst for like the temptation, the feelings of the black suit, and eventually like kind of having this acceptance and letting Sandman go. I mean, if you're talking about a cap to a trilogy, like Peter finally getting over Uncle Ben is like, if you're gonna end your trilogy happily, is like the only way you can do that,
Yeah, coming to grips with Uncle Ben's death and recognizing himself as Spider-Man, like being fully into that great power comes great responsibility. Don't fucking kill people, Peter. That's insane. I think that's a really satisfying conclusion to it from, my original opinion of, wow, that fucking sucked. The other part that we were talking about is just how, like, it feels, the fight feels really weird. And I think that's mainly because Venom feels like a really weird addition to the fight. I mentioned this a little bit in that he is there because like he webs everything up for Mary Jane and everything like that, but like it's super easy to just replace that with almost anything else that Sandman could do. But like by the end of the fight, Venom and Eddie Brock are both dead and gone. Like it's not a we have to deal with them first, and then we'll deal with Sandman. No, they just, like, die and disappear. Like, there's no resolution for them because they weren't supposed to be in this movie in the first place. Maybe Eddie Brock was. Topher Grace is a pretty good Eddie Brock.
Yeah, no, I really liked. I actually like, even though I didn't like Venom, I did like Eddie Brock. Like that felt like the sort of thing like having Peter's teacher be like Dr. Connors, like something that they keep in their back pocket in case they want to do the Lizard later, and like a theoretical Spider-Man 4 or 5,
Yeah,
and because with that, like that scene. Like, 'cause this is the kind of Eddie Brock that I want to see. It like kind of like sleazy, like yellow journalism, muckraker, photoshopping, and like spreading lies and stuff to get on J. Jonah Jameson's good side. And so like that's the nice thing about the way that the movie handles sort of Peter's moral descent, is that like it's really satisfying for Peter to fuck him over because he sucks, but like he sucks in a, I mean he sucks, but he's a good character, like in that way.
Right.
And so like, yeah, leaving it at that, like having that unresolved grudge for the Venom symbiote to maybe come in and like do something with that later could have been great, but like as it is, he just sort of like that is one thing that I definitely noticed, that it's very neat how like you deal with the symbiote and then Brock just kind of falls on his sword basically.
And like that's the thing too, is like this movie just presents Eddie Brock Eddie Brock and Venom are just entirely self-contained within this movie. Like everything else feels like there's implications from other movies, like Sandman is part of the Uncle Ben storyline and so forth. Like Eddie Brock shows up and leaves in the span of just one movie. And like I was getting at, it would make a lot of sense for Peter and Harry to reconcile their differences trying to save Mary Jane from just Sandman. Like you don't need Venom there at all. And like beating him up and then having that conversation and letting him go makes a lot more sense than he just disappears for half of the fight. Like he's just not there either.
Here's a thought. I wonder if this is the way things went down in the scripts, or like if something had changed and they had to rearrange the order, because Because the other thing I was thinking about is that, like, as a set piece, I kind of like the idea of the set piece, even though the fight itself feels kind of iffy and weird. I like the idea that you got Sandman, like, on the ground at this construction site, can turn himself into, like, a giant, but is only so, like, limited by verticality. And then you have Venom, who's kind of, like, up there in the sky. So there's threats no matter if you're on the top of the building or on the bottom of the building, which I think is a good dichotomy and a good setup to have for your action sequence. Like, that's a nice, cool, memorable sort of contrast. So I'm wondering, like, what's supposed to be Harry flying around there up the top?
Yeah, as you started to talk about that kind of came to me too, because it could very easily have been Harry. And, like, it wouldn't even be that big of a difference, because, like, he still could talk him out of it. Like, that was the whole idea, is resolution between the two of them.
Yeah, and because, like, I can see it within Harry's character as, like, seeing at this point MJ as, like, not like a friend, like, oh, she's still, like, you know, she was with that, like, dickhead Peter this whole time, and, like, she's nothing to me, I'm just gonna use her to, like, hurt him, and then, like, finally, like, realizing what a monster he's been. Like, that feels like a very natural setup too, because that was the other thing about it, is that Harry, after Peter, like, really fucks up his face, like hurts him really badly, and I'm like, oh shit. Like, when I saw that, the thing that's so weird is that Harry is so eager to help after that. So if it was him instead of Venom in this scenario, I think that makes a lot more sense as, like, an emotional beat too.
Plus, like, I feel like the butler showing up just being like, "Oh, sir, that was in fact not Peter who killed your dad. It was in fact himself." It's very weird and out of the blue. Like, I wonder if there was more to that scene that they just need, like, all right, let's wrap this shit up. We gotta do something here.
Yeah, because that brings up, like, the CinemaSins problem of, like, Butler, you could have said that literally any time.
And that's like a true problem.
Yeah.
Like, that's not like ding. That is like, dude, that's something that should have been brought up in the beginning if that's how you were going to resolve that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, you need to address why the butler was silent about his dad being, like, a raving lunatic.
And I mean, they try to a little bit. Like, they kind of mentioned, like, I don't talk about the things that I have seen in this house, but you should know. And I'm like, fine, but also fuck you.
It's very clearly just like a hand wave of, like, we gotta get him to the finale somehow.
Which I'm sure the finale would have been better if, you know, it was a little bit less Venom focused and more set up the way it sounds like it might have been originally. As I said, like, this whole movie feels like it could be done without Venom and just Peter's own internal emotions struggling with himself.
I think you bring up a lot of really good points here about Venom. I guess before we wrap up, I just want to mention two things. One of them's related to Harry, but that's kind of the longer thing I have to say. So I'm just gonna say really quickly, they did it. They finally did it. I'm gonna, like, be, like, crucified for this by people who hate Spider-Man 3, but this movie did legitimately do something way better than Spider-Man 2, and that's that MJ is actually sympathetic in this one. Wow, it's almost like the relationship problems, like, aren't just, like, her just, like, flitting about. Like, she actually has, like, problems in her life that Peter's ignoring, and they have a real character dynamic. Like, the romance, I mean, a lot of the damage was already done from how poorly the first two movies handled it, but this movie handles it way better. Way better.
It's almost like this is a fucking good trilogy, and, like, every one of them have their problems, but all together, they're really fucking good.
Yeah, and so, like, that's the other thing, I guess, just adding on to the Venom, like, you know, excising Venom from this, is that it feels kind of weird how, even though we were very clearly setting up Harry as, like, one of the major players of the new movie, and that, like, in both encounters with him, he's dealt with very quickly, which is strange, given, like, how much setup he had. And the first time it happened, I really liked it, because, like, you can see it in Peter's face, and it's, like, clearly intentional. It's like, hey, like, things are going great, like, I'm off the hook, like, Harry's my pal again, like, cool, and he lets it get to his head, and that's awesome. But then, you know, he kind of goes to the sidelines, Peter blows up his face, and then they're friends again, because the butler said so. And, like, if Harry really was gonna fill that role that Venom did, fuck, man, it would have been amazing.
It would have. it would have been an Amazing Spider-Man.
Ho ho ho.
But no, yeah, it Harry was definitely like clearly supposed to be the main central part of the third movie. Like they were clearly working through this whole thing of Peter and Harry as an arc from the beginning, and it just kind of fell on its face a little bit when Venom got added. And so like part of the problem, I guess, is that there's too many villains, but it's not so much because there are too many villains as much as it is just that Venom wasn't supposed to be there. Whoops.
Thanks, Avi Aaron.
So yeah, let's wrap this up. We're gonna be recording another episode immediately following this, talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So like, if you're listening to this the day it comes out, the next episode should be out within an hour or two. I'm gonna space them out just a little bit. So get ready for that. Come back and listen to that one if you've seen the movie. If you haven't yet, once again, we're doing a little bit of a different structure here, where we're taking 20 minutes ahead to talk about like things pre-spoilers, so like you can come and listen to our thoughts and like get a general idea on how we feel about the movie before we get into it. So you know, get involved with that. Next week, if you are not going to be listening to Into the Spider-Verse, we're gonna be talking about fucking Santa Claus Conquers the Martian. Shout out to Chris, or the Bearded Bane on Twitch, for suggesting this to us way back when. I'm sure he has already forgotten that he suggested this to us. But that's going to be coming out on Christmas Eve. So that's going to be next week's episode. It's going to be coming out on Monday. So get ready for that one. I'm sure that's just going to be a meme episode, and it's just going to be a bunch of jokes.
Hell yeah, let's conquer some Martians.
Other than that, though, I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. You can also check out my website, isortof.com. It's got a bunch of stuff there, including my Twitch stream and everything. It's got everything.
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me over on Twitter at JacksonJKeller. I'm there sometimes, not really that much, but you know, I can say hello. I can open the door for you. I'll give you a handshake, a Twitter handshake.
You can tweet at them and combine with like other fans of the podcast and talk about the Two Guns Jackson's anime that's currently in the works.
Shh, that was a secret project no one was supposed to know yet.
Fuck, I'm sorry.
Sure, you broke the NDA. Do you realize what's gonna happen? Toei Animation's gonna sue us into the ground.
Shit, it's the sequel to Trigun Two Guns Jackson.
There wasn't enough room in the budget for the third gun. We had to downsize.
As always, thanks loads to the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane Low Expectations. They're available on Spotify, all that good stuff. Go check them out. They're really cool. Also, thanks to 25yearslatersite.com for hosting us. Once again, this is an episode that I am proud to put on there. If you want a bunch of other great analysis, great conversations about like movies, cult stuff, all that good stuff, check them out. They're wonderful. A bunch of great people on it, great writers, all very smart. Wonderful site. I've already said what we're doing next week. I've done this whole end sequence way out of order, but we're going to pretend like that was intentional.
New Spider-Man. Go, 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 go.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go